So people are saying we're in a bear market already. I think they're jumping the gun. I think they're being impatient. And I think we're getting close to, that's why I'm saying I think we're getting close to capitulation, and I think we're going to see a very strong bounce.
과거 금융위기 당시 정확한 시장 예측으로 큰 주목을 받았던 경제 전문가 알레시오 라스타니가 현재 혼란에 빠진 암호화폐 시장에 대한 자신의 분석을 전합니다. 과연 위기에 빠진 지금의 시장은 상승장 속 조정일까요? 아니면 새로운 하락장의 시작일까요? 그의 통찰력 있는 분석을 함께 살펴보시죠.
People are really confused about the situation right now. We don't know whether we are in a bear market or still in a bull market. You put out a very interesting video not long ago where you were analyzing a key technical metric that people should pay attention to. It's the death cross. The death cross was hit on November 15, and you were basically saying that because of that signal, there is a 75% possibility that Bitcoin will rally higher in the time frame of 1 to 3 months. Do you still stand by your assessment?
Yeah, basically my point in that video was that we looked at every example. So we looked at every instance of a death cross signal. So there was a death cross signal when the 50 simple moving average crossed below the 200 simple moving average there. The gray-white line went below the green. And we can see it actually signaled the bottom on Bitcoin, almost very close to a bottom, as we can see there. And then the price rallied in the next few months. Sometimes it rallies immediately, sometimes it takes a bit longer. But generally, again, in the examples that I found, let me show you one more. So this chart from 2024 shows that there was death cross there. And you can see, soon after the death cross signal there, market was about to bottom. And I remember so many videos usually come out when there's a death cross signal saying, oh, it's the end of the world. Bitcoin is now in a bear market just because of there's a death cross. That is not the case. What I found was that 75% of the time, when there's a death cross signal, going back to 2011, so I looked at every example of a death cross signal when the moving averages, the long-term moving average cross over in a negative direction. 75% of the time, the Bitcoin price usually is about to bottom or getting close to a bottom or capitulation, and then rallies in the next, in other words, bounces or rallies is positive for the next 1 to 3 months. By the way, I found that when the death cross signal occurs after an all-time high, the probability is actually even higher. I did not discuss this in the video that I made, but we have to remember, Bitcoin went from an all-time high just a while ago, I think it was October, when it went to an all-time high of just near 126,000. Then it dropped to extreme oversold conditions with a sudden death cross. To me, this is even a stronger probability that we could see positive returns. So some kind of a strong rally or bounce in the next 1 to 3 months. Now, why do I say 1 to 3 months? Why not the next year? Because again, the higher probability, the 75% probability was for the medium term. The long term is much more complicated. And for that, we'll have to discuss something else. We'll have to look at other factors, which we'll discuss with you in this video. So by the way, that's the reason why in that video I said I'm bullish for the next 1 to 3 months, and why we should not suddenly get panicked out. Because there's only a 25% low probability of the price action dropping even further into a bear market, 25% probability. So I'm going with a higher probability of being positive for the next few months. So for me, I would say one of the major factors I'm watching right now, other than Bitcoin, is the stock market, the S&P, the Dow, but mostly the S&P. And the stock market still remains in a bull market. We have to remember that. Now, it's true, the stock market could be having a correction right now. In other words, a pullback, which we expected, by the way. It's not a surprise. I expected this kind of correction or pullback in the stock market, which is now shaping as we're making this video. Now, the stock market could actually pull back a bit lower. In other words, we could continue a bit lower on this correction we're seeing in the stock market. But I'm not expecting a bear market on the S&P or the stock markets. I think the bull market on the stock markets, as far as I'm concerned, I think that's going to continue into 2026. I'm not seeing any signs that the stock market or the economy even for the next 6 months or the next 6 to 12 months is going to fall into a crash or a recession. Now, we might get a recession or a bear market crash maybe sometime at the end of next year, like at the end of 2026 or going into 2027 even, but not in the immediate term, not in the next several months. Now, it's true, we're going through some rough patch right now, a bit of a glitch. So we're seeing a correction. And I still think this drop in Bitcoin is a correction, not a reversal into a bear market. So I think that once this correction in Bitcoin and stock market is out of the way, yeah, I think that next year, as long as the stock market remains in a bull market and an uptrend, I'm remaining bullish on Bitcoin for the next 6 months, going to next year.
When you said that markets, according to you, are mainly moved by sentiment, and I just wanted to ask you this because I was looking at this sentiment right now, this indicator fear and greed index.
Yes.
And it shows that we have been for several weeks already in a extreme fear environment. So I was wondering, how do you...
Bitcoin or stock market, sorry.
For Bitcoin. So I was just wondering, how do you combine that to what you just said?
Yes, sure. Basically, what I'm referring to is that sentiment often becomes a very good contrary indicator, especially at extremes. What we're seeing right now, and I noticed this on social media, and I think social media is a very good, useful indication when we reach an extreme in sentiment. So when Bitcoin was at its all-time high, just back in October or September, October, the sentiment was very positive, very bullish on Bitcoin and the stock market as well. And nobody was expecting a drop. Everybody was calling higher levels based on fundamentals and things like that. Now that Bitcoin has dropped, sentiment's turned negative. But there comes a point, by the way, right now the sentiment on Bitcoin is so negative, so pessimistic. Bitcoin has become so hated. Basically, everybody's calling for much lower levels. Everybody's saying, oh, it's now going to... I've seen comments on Bitcoin. I've seen comments from people saying it's going to go to 10K, to $0, to $1. People saying, forget Bitcoin, sell it. It's a fiction. Again, I'll send this to you so you can show it to people. And Bitcoin has become extremely hated, probably because a lot of these folks, people who don't know what they're doing, they bought Bitcoin at its near the all-time highs, and they're now feeling a lot of pain. They probably sold during this crash that happened. They panicked out. And by the way, even if Bitcoin continues to drop, I'm not saying Bitcoin has definitely bottomed at this point. Even if, I should say, I think we're getting close to a bottom, and I'll explain why. But even if Bitcoin drops a little bit more, okay, I think the levels of fear will become so extreme, they're already extreme anyway, that we're going to see capitulation. I think we're very close to capitulation. People just giving up, probably just selling their Bitcoin. Again, these are people who are not your hardcore believers in Bitcoin. I mean, these are average people who probably bought Bitcoin just for, as a get-rich-quick scheme of some sort. So these people will probably give up, or maybe they have already given up. And I think we're getting close to, that's why I'm saying I think we're getting close to capitulation and a bottom. The levels of fear are reaching such an extreme that it then becomes a good contrary indication when these people give up and they sell.
Based on your analysis, what are the odds that Bitcoin will reach new all-time highs, let's say, by the end of the year?
By the end of the year, I think it's low. I think it's because we have such a short amount of time. We only have a few weeks at the end of the year. However, I am more positive perhaps by January, February, or March. And here's why. I'm going to explain to you why I'm still remaining bullish, cautiously bullish, I should say. This is the chart of Bitcoin going back as far as we can go. I mean, to 2011, okay, as you can see there. And you'll see something really interesting here. Every top in Bitcoin, going back to 2011, before a bear market begins, okay, before a major downward cycle begins, notice that each one of those tops from 2011, 2014, 2018, 2021, 2020, the previous ones, not the most recent one. Every one of those previous tops was accompanied by a blow-off top, where in other words, where the price goes so high, so extreme, that we see price acceleration, extreme acceleration, which is shown to you by those red vertical bars underneath. Maybe you can see that. So let me just point this out. So notice every single one of these particular tops, let me just increase the length here. Every one of them was accompanied by some kind of a extreme acceleration signal. You can see that here. Guess what? We didn't get that in 2025. Except every year except this most recent one. Now, this is very unusual. So every time, every previous top in history, especially 2018, 2021, 2014, when I say 2018, I really mean 2017, sorry. So every one of these particular highs or tops in Bitcoin before a bear market has been accompanied by a blow-off top, which is shown by price acceleration. Price acceleration or extreme acceleration is when price moves too far, too fast, okay? And that's why you get those red bars underneath. That's much more objective. That's why I look at that particular indicator. That's what's keeping you bullish. Because if the majority of the time, if every single time in history, tops have been accompanied by price acceleration, extreme acceleration, a blow off top, the fact that we did not get one this year in 2025, that's unusual. So that means the higher probability is that we probably have more to go, more upside to go, maybe next year, maybe not this year, but new highs likely, if not this year, in January, February, or March. And then we get a blow off top, extreme acceleration shown by these red bars, these red signals, and then we get a top. So that's what's keeping you bullish. I don't think we've reached the top just yet. Take a look at this. So people are saying we're in a bear market already. I think they're jumping the gun. I think they're being impatient. We need to be patient. We have now reached a trend line support going back to the year 2023. The RSI, that purple line underneath, is oversold, okay? And usually when it's oversold on the weekly time frame, is a weekly chart. RSI, the 7-period setting, is oversold, and we're at support. We're at support. So I think it's a bit unwise, a bit dangerous to get too bearish at this point, okay? So I think we need to be careful. I think we're going to see a very strong bounce. I think a big rally or bounce is coming based on oversold conditions, based on reaching support.
라스타니는 지금의 하락이 약세장이 시작이냐 아니면 상승장 안에서의 조정이냐에 대한 답을 데이터로 풀어내고자 했는데요. 그가 제시하는 핵심 근거는 크게 세 가지입니다. 첫째, 라스타니는 데드크로스를 단순한 하락 신호로 해석하는 것은 위험하다고 봅니다. 2011년 이후 비트코인에서 발생한 모든 데드크로스 사례를 분석한 결과 약 75% 확률로 1개월에서 3개월 내 저점 형성 또는 투매 이후 반등이 나타났다는 점을 강조합니다. 특히 사상 최고가 이후 발생한 데드크로스일수록 반등 확률이 더 높았다는 점에서 이를 약세장 확정 신호로 단정하는 것은 과도하다는 주장입니다. 둘째, 그는 현재 시장의 심리를 중요한 보조 지표로 봅니다. 공포 탐욕 지수와 소셜미디어 전반에서 나타나는 극단적인 비관론은 과거 사이클에서도 저점 인근에서 반복적으로 관측됐다는 겁니다. 이러한 과도한 공포는 신념 없는 투자자들의 투매 국면과 겹치며 역발상 관점에서는 중기 반등 가능성을 시사한다고 설명합니다. 셋째, 라스타니가 특히 주목한 부분은 이번 사이클에서 아직 블로우 오프 탑, 즉 극단적 가격 가속 신호가 확인되지 않았다는 점입니다. 과거 모든 주요 고점은 가격 가속과 함께 형성됐지만 이번 움직임에서는 그 전형적인 고점 신호가 나타나지 않았습니다. 여기에 주봉 RSI 매도와 장기 추세선 지지까지 고려할 때 그는 현 구간을 성급히 약세장으로 규정하는 것은 위험하다고 판단합니다. 결론적으로 라스타니는 데이터상으로 1개월에서 3개월 내 의미 있는 반등 가능성이 우세하며 아직 사이클의 마지막 국면에 도달했다고 보기는 어렵다는 것이 그의 핵심 메시지입니다. 그리고 혹시 거래 수수료 절반을 다시 환급받는 방법 아직 모르시나요? 단 5분만 투자하면 평생 수수료 돌려받는 셀퍼럴, 선택이 아닌 필수입니다. 자세한 내용은 영상 더보기란을 확인해 보세요.
We're going to see a big rally on Bitcoin, a huge bounce. I'm not saying it's going to happen immediately, okay? It could happen in the next few weeks, probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Potentially maybe at least in December. Then we're going to see a big rally or bounce, about 15 to 20% minimum, I think. And then let's see what kind of a pattern we get, what kind of a rally we get. And will that rally be able to get above that weekly 21 moving average? If it can get above it and stay above it, we know that's a good sign. That's a positive sign. But if the next rally fails and then rolls over again, then no, then we're in a bear market. So I think, again, people who are saying we're already in a bear market. The problem is, as I'm sure you know, Giovanni, as I'm sure you've seen, people nowadays, because of social media, they're so impatient. Everything is about emotion. Everything's about, people want to know information right now. Like, tell me right now what's happening. Sometimes you don't have all the information. Sometimes you have to wait for the market to give you more information. So that's why I'm saying, let's be patient. Let's see what the market gives us in the next several weeks, in December especially. If that rally, let's wait for the rally, let's wait for the bounce. If the rally or bounce fails at the weekly 21 moving average, the blue line, and if the bounce is corrective, if it's like this, if it's like a three-wave bounce like we saw in the years 2021, 2022, for example, that's how you can know that, then you can know you're in a bear market.
오늘 영상 도움이 되셨다면 구독 또 좋아요 또 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.